Hello out there, and welcome back to the GamecockScoop.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecockScoop.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Pauline and Alan, and we have a lot of Gamecock stuff to talk to you about this week, although I assume most of you right now are watching March Madness, so we're talking to you after, most likely, but that's fine. Furman already...
Some of us are watching College of Charleston right now, too, but it's all good.
Yeah, we can multitask. Keep us updated on how that ends up, Alan. But yeah, Furman already moved on, so we might have all
South Carolina mid-majors. Yeah,
that'd be dope.
Clemson and South Carolina couldn't get in, but Furman and College of Charleston sure could.
We're going to talk a little bit more about March Madness later in the show, give our final four picks, obviously talk about the women's bracket a good bit because South Carolina is the number one overall seed and should have an interesting path to attempt their repeat. Before we get into all that, though, spring practice is back. There's some recruiting news. There's all sorts of football stuff going on. I feel like we just finished football, but here we are. We're back. So before we get into spring football, which started on Tuesday. It kicked off on Monday with Pro Day, but official practice started on Tuesday. Let's talk recruiting for just a second. I will have a full weekly recruiting wrap-up posted either later tonight or tomorrow, probably tomorrow if I know myself, including a visitors list because I'm expecting quite a few visitors this weekend. And there's already been some visitors on campus this week. Those include wide receiver Micah Gilbert, running back Anthony Carey, and perhaps the most intriguing from a immediate sort of news standpoint, Josiah Thompson was on campus on Tuesday. That's in-state O-lineman from Dillon. I've had a future cast in for him since December to South Carolina. And then coincidentally, right, Tuesday afternoon, he tweeted that he has made up his decision. So, there's a lot of good positive momentum that says that should be good news for South Carolina, unless he went on Tuesday and had a terrible time and decided that he is not going to go there. But that wouldn't be my guess. So kind of keep your eyes peeled for Josiah Thompson news. But some other 2024 recruits on campus this weekend, and I will have that full list out for you, like I said, tomorrow. Let's talk football, though, right? So Monday started with Pro Day. You guys were both able to attend that. I know Pauline got some pretty good shots there, but for the most part, what I heard is you couldn't see a ton of what was happening. We got some times afterwards. I know Josh Van ran a 4.43, which is really good news after his knee injury that he suffered against Clemson near the end of the season. So good to see him back at full speed. Did you guys have any other notes from Pro Day on Monday?
It's good to hear some of the guys talk. We got to talk to, Rush, Smith. I'm trying to think. Rush, Smith, Douglas, Pickens, Adkins. There were a couple others afterwards. It's good to hear them. It's good to see how they do in the draft. I think you're looking at probably 4 Gamecocks getting drafted here, probably. You've got Smith, Rush, Pickens for sure. Gwynn should get picked. I don't know if someone else might slide into 7th round or something, but definitely those 4. And I still think Cam Smith could go in the 1st round if the right team falls in love with him.
I feel like you could see maybe a Nate Adkins get picked up late. I know that he's bringing a lot to the table from a utility standpoint.
Here's a fun note for those of you who are – this won't affect South Carolina because he's not playing anymore, but he was long snapping at Pro Day. It's something NFL teams want to see him do, just a way to get himself extra reps. He spent Pro Day long snapping.
And that is one thing I noticed. We're going to get to this in a second, but we had the coordinators on yesterday.
Yes.
And Pete Limbo talked about special teams and how that does make some of these guys that are sort of fringe guys more attractive to these NFL teams because you only have so many that you sign to an active NFL roster. So if you have a person that can play their position but also can start on special teams, that's a big win for a lot of those guys.
Yeah, and I do think that'll help get a few of these guys at least UDFA spots, if nothing else, going into camp.
All right, the big questions about spring practice. There's a lot of questions, obviously, but I think the things, especially as a recruiting website, that most people tend to be interested in are the newcomers. I know that some of the coordinators talked about guys like Nicholas Harbor, 5-star. He's not there yet. But then there are several other guys that enrolled early. Pup Howard comes to mind, who's probably going to play a good bit this year at linebacker. You have Jalen Kilgore there.
Desmond
Umuizulu, who's another guy that's probably going to be relied on early. And it was good to hear that Clayton White thinks that he's going to be a force in the run game. Maybe not as a freshman, which is what we've said, but still, I mean, that means he's got pretty good size walking in the door. What did you notice from that first spring practice? I know you guys got the first 6 periods or so on Tuesday.
Go ahead, Pauline. You got something?
I mean, I was focused on the quarterbacks a lot in the back, but I don't want to say anything too soon because it really was only the first practice. I still think when I talked to Mo Kaba last week, he said that he doesn't think he's going to be participating in spring practice. I don't know if there are any other key players that are out right now. That like
Strahan's probably not going to be full.
Yeah, Strawn's not participating. You've got Tonka Hemingway and Case and Henry also were off to the side injured. And David Spalding is still limited too, but he was out there.
You do mention the quarterbacks.
Good. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is that we really focused a lot on that in the recruiting universe,
yeah, so
I guess.
Something that I heard from that day was Lenore Sellers was getting some early reps, and then several coordinators and Shane Beamer himself, I think, talked about how they've like seen him being the last person off the field. Someone was, I think it might have been Beamer was talking about seeing him from the office being.
I think, he's got a cannon like that. That's nothing new. I think all of us know he's got arm strength. Lenore Sellers has a cannon.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, right? Because this in-state kid was a late offer, blew up as a senior, and yet he's one of the most talked about guys already as an early enrollee in this spring camp. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Obviously, he's not going to push for the starting job this year or anything like that. But
that's kind of more your depth chart stuff. What does that mean for Tanner Bailey? What does that mean for Colton Gauthier? What does that mean for kind of the rest of the room? Obviously, you would be looking at a series of disasters if you ever needed Lenore Sellers to play in 2023 with Spencer and Luke still here. But he's here and he seems to be making an impression.
Yeah, and another thing that I saw from the coordinators was, I believe it was Clayton White mentioned that it feels like this team is all on the same page from like want to be here and effort and all that stuff. And it seems like that's why they're giving someone like Sellers early reps or whatever, is he's kind of immediately bought in. And I do think, obviously there's some questions because of the defections to the portals, including big names like Marshawn Lloyd and Jordan Birch last offseason. But I do think there's something to be said that it seems like the core of the team, everyone wants to be there and everyone is kind of working together for that goal. And we're going into year 3, right? So you don't really have that many Muschamp guys left hanging around. So that'll be interesting to see.
I was focused on the O linemen's when I was
next
pictures. Yeah, and they did honestly seem like, even though we had major gaps that we were missing once the season ended, I think they looked still pretty like good as a unit, and they were still working like, I don't know what your take was, Alan, but I thought that they looked, maybe they're not like amazing, but as a team, they're blending very well together. I think.
My take is more just I wrote about this yesterday on the website. If you're subscribed, you read that. I was more looking at, all right, who's playing center? Because you've had Eric Douglas. I mean, Eric Douglas has played center literally every single game of the Shane Beamer era. That's not an exaggeration. He's graduated now. He's not here. And right now, when we were out there, Vershawn Lee was taking the snaps. We know Nick Gargiulio has also been doing that. It's kind of the 2 front runners now. But Dowell Loggins and Shane Beamer both talked about needing to get as many guys ready at that position as possible, just because you never know when you're going to need someone to direct traffic in the middle of the offensive line.
Nick playing in this, I could see Nick playing this season.
I think he still could be the starting center. I don't think Vershawn Lee taking snaps in period 1 of practice 1 of spring ball. As much as we want to read into that stuff, it doesn't necessarily mean that on September 1st, Gershulio won't be the one snapping the ball to Spencer on the first play.
Yeah, so Beamer kind of joked with you guys in his opening statement the other day that you were all like furiously writing down every,
Can confirm.
every starter. So just for those that are curious, and again, huge grain of salt, it's the first day of spring practice, not even fall practice. But the 5 starting O linemen were Jalen Nichols at left tackle, Ja'Kai Moore at left guard, Vershawn Lee at center, like you said, Trey Jones at right guard, and Tyshawn Wanamaker at right tackle. But we could still see a lot shake up between now and the end of August. But it's an interesting note that they're sitting there.
Just Casey Henry's going to push for that right tackle job. He played there a little bit last year, mop up. I think the staff kind of likes him, and obviously he's hurt right now, but I don't think that's going to be, I don't know if that's not going to be Wanamaker, but I think there's a battle there once Casey Henry's healthy going into the fall.
First, not a battle, at least a secured spot eventually.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, they really have a lot of depth coming up in the next couple of classes. So, you have that veteran presence that have played a lot of games, not necessarily started every game, but played a lot of games over the last 3 years. But then you are going to start to see, I think, some of those guys work their way in. You got Casey Henry, you got the 4 stars from the 2023 class, Marquis Anderson, Tosin Babalade. And then we're already off to a fast start with 2024 class. Cam Pringle, who's the number 2 rated offensive lineman in the whole class. We just talked about Josiah Thompson. If he does end up at South Carolina, he's another 4-star. So it seems like they've really kind of stacked the depth there. Now it's just bridging the gap until all of those guys mature.
Yeah, and that's obviously it all starts up front. You feel good about your quarterback situation. You feel good about your receiver situation with Juice back, but you win and lose up front. I don't think anybody's would argue with that.
Another big storyline for spring that we kind of previewed last week is we have a new offensive coordinator. So we haven't gotten a ton of FaceTime with Dowell Loggins. We had his opening press conference, but he spoke with the media yesterday. Were there any takeaways that you had, Alan, from his media availability? One thing I kind of noticed was he was talking about Trey Knox, who came with him to Arkansas, being very helpful and kind of taking on a leadership role on offense and helping other people get up to speed with some of the language, because obviously he's using some of that language that he used at Arkansas.
Yeah, obviously this is a whole new tight end. We've talked about that at length. Elksnis, Knox. It does look different. Josh Simon. It's Trey Knox. I mean, that guy was a receiver by trade. He's got the size. He's got the speed. He's got the familiarity with Loggins, like you said. We did see, for what it's worth, again, on that little set, whatever you want to call it, with the 5 offensive linemen, it was Rattler at quarterback, Juju at running back, and then your 4 playmakers, I guess, skill position players split out. It was Juice, Trey Knox, Leggett, and Amarian Brown. So I think you could see something close to that skill position wise in September. I definitely think Trey Knox is a different kind of tight end to what this program had last year. And that's something Shane Beamer talked about too.
Yeah, and then I guess another note offensively, and Loggins talked a little bit about this, was Takarian Joyner got a few snaps at running back. He's been kind of a utility knife the entire Swiss Army knife, whatever you want to call him, his entire career here. But at a position that's very thin right now, which Loggins kind of pushed back at the idea that it was thin, right? He was like, you coach who you got. But we can say it. We're not in the room.
There's 2 scholarship running backs on the roster. That's thin. That just is.
So yeah, that could be interesting if he kind of develops into someone that's taking carries out of the backfield a little bit. I think he could do it. He would have to bulk up a little bit, which then might hurt his draft stock at NFL or at wide receiver. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Also, we talked about how there's going to be a portal window that opens back up here in a couple of weeks. I still think running back is a position that they're going to target.
I think it's non-negotiable. They're going to need at least one back in the portal. There's just not enough bodies in that room. Loggins, he can say what he wants about liking who's there, and that's fine. And I don't even think he's necessarily lying, but there's not enough bodies there to go into a season. There's just not.
You can like people, but you can't chance the fact that we wouldn't have anybody.
I mean, that's just such a position of injury, especially when you think about your two guys there now, or a guy who's 5'7" and a guy who's never played D1 football. That's all you got at running back right now on scholarship. You're going to have to get another one.
Yeah, exactly. He was one of the people that were complimentary of Lenore Sellers already. He says there's not really a depth chart at quarterback yet, but he called out Sellers by name, said he had a great offseason, gotten some reps because of the way that he's worked and competed, which if you guys saw that video that we retweeted from Gamecock Football, and we also posted on the Insiders Forum of the winter workouts. I think we mentioned this last week. Lenore Sellers went up like 150 pounds in his squat or whatever, which, that's the difference between a high school weight program and a college weight program. But still, I mean, that's him putting in the work. He obviously showed up as a man on a mission.
For sure.
What about the other coordinators? Pete Limbo's always a fun interview. Clayton White, anything kind of come out of those?
I don't have much to say about Pete other than I enjoy listening to him talk. It's just fun. He's mentioned they're going to revamp Gunner. They lost some guys there this year, but that special teams is so, I don't want to say like self-sufficient because obviously a lot of work goes into it, but Kai Kroger's back. Mitch Jeter's back. Like, Pauline, I don't know if you're trying to talk. You're kind of muted right now, but we can't hear you. But Kai Kroger's back. Mitch Jeter's back. Oh, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, after you said self-sufficient, I was going to say you don't got to worry about them. Like,
nope, that's the way to put it. You're nobody's worried about Kai Kroger and Mitch Jeter, which kind of not defeats the purpose of Pete Lembo talking, but it does take away a lot of what people would normally ask.
Right, and then we already made the note that Clayton White talked about Desmond Umeozulu. Eventually,
Donovan Westmoreland playing edge right now. It's another position of kind of thin depth that we talked about. They're kind of working him out there.
Yeah, which I was mistaken the other day. I was talking in the Slack, and I said that I thought he got recruited as a safety, but he got recruited as a linebacker with the idea that he could bulk up and play edge a little bit. So he's still not quite as big as you'd like. He might be very useful in pass rushing situations, but he has put on some size.
Well, speaking of that, here's something people might enjoy. At the very end of the presser, he got a quick little question about, so is Nick Harbour going to play any defense? Because if you'll remember early on in that recruiting, that was part of the process. And Clayton said, obviously, he'd love to have him. If they want to have the conversation with Shane, he's not going to say no, but he thinks that would be like an extreme end of game, end of half, 3rd and 20 pass rush. Like there's a role for him on defense, maybe, but I wouldn't expect that. But clearly Clayton White's thought about it because he was able to tell us quickly what he would want to do with him.
Yeah. I think it would also be fun to put him in that, like on special teams and try to block field goals. What was that guy's name from Florida that used to be just like a specialist on that? He was a DN.
I know who you're talking about. I'm blanking the name. But yeah, just someone with freakish athleticism and height can kind of just get up and block a field goal.
Yeah, so maybe we see something like that because we see starters on special teams all the time anyway. Sorry, go ahead, Pauline.
I was just gonna say we weren't even just like able to see the pro day, like people like jump. So I don't know. I just thought that was funny, a little connection in.
Yeah, which Josh Fan also put in a pretty good vertical, 38 inches, 36 inches, something, almost 4 feet, pretty solid.
They were literally on the opposite side of the block with
it was pretty bad.
People.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely intentionally try to keep the media at arm's length on that. Another quick pro day note, all 32 NFL teams had a representative on campus for that. So, but yeah, we'll have more spring practice insights as we get more availability. We posted the full schedule on GamecockScoop.com last week. If you want to go check that out, I think you can also find it on the university website or whatever. And there's several other media availability opportunities, but it's a crazy week. There's a ton going on. So let's move on to the next thing. We got women's basketball. The women's basketball tournament is starting this weekend. South Carolina, of course, is in the Columbia Regional, and they have Norfolk State in the first round. That is tomorrow.
Tomorrow, 2:00. It'll be a little after 2 probably. The other game's at 11:30, and then it's like 30 minutes after the first game ends. So probably a little bit after 2, live on ESPN tomorrow.
Yeah, and we kind of talked over the last several weeks about who could end up in that regional. And really, due to unfortunate circumstances, it's worked out pretty well for them. So the 3 seed is Notre Dame, but we just found out that they are missing one of their key players for
Olivia Miles. Yeah, she's done for the tournament with a knee injury. That sucks, but it does kind of work for South Carolina.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, UCLA also has an injury.
They are down a player. They're the 4 seed. That would be if the chalk holds, that would be your Sweet 16 game next Saturday in Greenville, which I think is super interesting just because UCLA was the only team all year who came to Colonial Life Arena and held South Carolina within single digits. They were the only one.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting that your 3 and 4 seed are not quite at 100%, and then your 2 seed there is Maryland, which is a dangerous team. But
you did beat in the regular season, but their best player, Diamond Miller, was not healthy for that game, so it kind of works the other way. They've gotten healthy at the right time, but you wouldn't see them until the Elite Eight,
right,
if at all.
So relative to other paths, South Carolina has a pretty easy path, although the Final Four matchup is kind of what we thought the national championship matchup would be, would be Stanford, right? Stanford's the 1 seed on the same side. So that'll be interesting to watch. I thought it'd be kind of fun if we all looked at our Sweet 16 and just kind of like went from there. Pauline, you have yours pulled up?
College of Charleston's down 3 in the last minute, by the way. They're hanging in, but they got to get a bucket. They're on defense. They need to hope for some missed free throws and hit a 3.
All right. Well, if they hit one, we'll let you take over the play-by-play for a second. So yeah, I didn't want to go all the way through all 64 teams from the women's bracket or whatever, but let's start at the round of 16 for your bracket, and then we'll kind of go in from there. So I'll go first, and then Pauline, and then Alan. So let's just go region by region. If I'm looking at the Greenville 1 region, my round of 16 matchups are, of course, South Carolina and UCLA. And then I have Creighton and Maryland from that Greenville 1 region in the Sweet 16. So a little bit of a upset. I have Creighton over Notre Dame, obviously, because that injury.
Miles. Yeah. That's the same 4 I had. I had Notre Dame before this morning when I found out about Olivia Miles. Creighton's a dangerous team. Obviously, South Carolina fans know about them. They went to the Elite Eight as a 10 seed last year and played South Carolina. Yeah, I think that's kind of where I am too with that. You've got, what is that, the 1, 2, 4, and 6 seeds in that region?
That's correct. Pauline, who do you have in your round of 16 for the Greenville 1 region?
I had South Carolina, UCLA, Creighton.
Maryland's their 4th one?
Because I like choosing upsets too. And
got Arizona?
Yeah.
That's the one that would be a big upset, yeah. That would, if you talk about things that would really, really make this path easier for South Carolina, it would be Maryland going out in the first weekend.
No, yeah, because then in that scenario, your highest seed that you're going to have to play is for UCLA, and they're a little bit banged up. So let's go to our Seattle 4 region. I'm just going by the way it's laid out in Yahoo, so sorry if I'm jumping around for you guys.
No, you're good.
The Seattle 4 region, Sweet 16, I have Stanford versus Texas, so very chalky there. And then I do have an upset, Colorado upsetting Duke to get to the Sweet 16 to play Iowa. So 1 and 4 versus 6 and 2.
Yeah, I went even further on the upset train in that regional. I do have Stanford. I have Stanford and Louisville as my top 2 there. I think Louisville can beat Texas. I do think the Big 12 as a league was kind of down this year. I tend not to trust teams in the Big 12. It's also why I had Oklahoma losing to UCLA. And I always try to pick one double-digit seed to get to the Sweet 16 because there's always at least one. And I got 11 Middle Tennessee State. MTSU, I think they only lost 4 or 5 games all year. They might have been a little underseeded. And you saw a 10 seed in Creighton get there last year. I think you see an 11 MTSU this year. And then Iowa, of course, Caitlin Clark. I have them get to the Sweet 16 too. So Stanford, Louisville, Middle Tennessee State, and Iowa.
So yeah, we both picked our upset to go against Iowa, I think, because that's the easy thing, because you just have Iowa moving on after that.
Right.
And if you get it wrong, it doesn't hurt you too bad. But that would hurt me bad because one of us is going to be pretty disappointed after that first game between Colorado and Mississippi or Middle Tennessee State.
That's a good first round game. That's two pretty good teams.
Pauline, your Sweet 16 for the Seattle 4 region.
I stayed safe with it.
Oh, she cut out.
You loser? What does safe mean? Does that mean just chalk?
We're gonna go with. Oh, she's back. Hold on.
Maybe.
Two Paulines? All right. What'd you go with? We lost you for a sec.
Okay.
You said you went safe?
I played it safe, and I went with Stanford, Texas, Duke, and then Iowa.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I think there's breeding ground for chaos here, but definitely Stanford and Iowa are head and shoulders above the rest of this regional. I would be very surprised if that's not the Elite Eight matchup, not to jump ahead.
No, yeah, I agree. So I think that just felt like a safe regional to pick an upset in because it felt like the Elite Eight was going to play out that way. All right, let's go to the Greenville 2 region. So some more basketball that you guys will get to see in person, hopefully, if things work out. This is the one I went completely chalk on. I went number 1 Indiana versus Villanova and number 3 LSU versus number 2 Utah. Although I think that is one of the best possible matchups of the entire Sweet 16 if that plays out, LSU versus Utah.
Yeah, I went full chalk here too. I think this is the most top-heavy region. I mean, Indiana's been number 2 in the polls most of the year behind South Carolina. Obviously, LSU got as high as number 3, and they've only lost twice this season. Utah won the Pac-12. Villanova's got the best pure scorer in the country. Maddie Seegers she scored at least 20 in every single game, led the country in scoring. I guess there's some chaos possibility. Washington State's hot, winning the Pac-12 tournament. Can never count out NC State. It's an experienced team, but this feels like the one where you're going to get just a straight 1, 2, 3, 4.
Pauline, what about you?
I've never really seen Utah play, and I'm really just like, I like choosing not really normal ones. So I said Indiana, Villanova, LSU, and then NC State. Because I do think that NC State is
Yep, that'd be the one if I had to choose one of the top 4 that could lose, get NC State, Utah in the second round. I could see that, but I think Utah's too good.
But they'll make it to the Sweet 16.
Yep.
They're going to get shut out immediately.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, you took more chances than I did for sure. I think history says that you're probably going to get one of those right. All right, and then our last region is Seattle 3. So round of 16 matchups, I again went chalk. So this whole side of the bracket, I went completely chalk. Virginia Tech, number 1 versus number 4 Tennessee, and then Ohio State, number 3 versus number 2 Connecticut.
Yeah, I have all chalk except for one of those. So I do have Virginia Tech and Tennessee in that top part, and then bottom I have North Carolina. I just don't think that goes completely chalk. I think Carolina's pretty good. Struggle to score, but defensively very tough. South Carolina saw that last year, that Sweet 16 game, and that defense is carried over. And then UConn coming out of that. So I've got Virginia Tech, Tennessee, North Carolina, UConn.
I could definitely see it playing out that way too. Pauline, what about you?
So Virginia Tech,
That's
Iowa State,
yeah.
Ohio, UConn.
Yeah. That Iowa State Tennessee second round game could be good, but I'm going back to I'm not trusting the Big 12 thing just because I don't.
One's gonna be, I don't know. I feel like that one's close.
I also
plus you get that game in Knoxville. Tennessee's hosting that regional,
and I like to go with momentum, especially in basketball tournaments, right, where you're kind of catching lightning in a bottle or whatever. And Tennessee was playing very strong down the stretch here.
Charleston came up short, lost by 4.
Well, Furman's the lone hope for the state of South Carolina.
I think Furman can win that game Saturday, but we're doing the women's now, but I think Furman can win that game.
All right, let's go back to Greenville 1 and pick our winners from that Sweet 16. So, spoiler, South Carolina over UCLA, and then I have Maryland over Creighton. So that'd
I'm rolling
be
with the chalk
South Carolina versus Maryland in the Elite Eight out of Greenville 1. What about you, Pauline?
I said USC and Maryland. So I mean,
Didn't you have Maryland losing
and then
to
USC
Arizona?
Oh wait, sorry. Are we only on the Sweet 16 right now?
Yeah,
No, we're on Elite Eight.
There would be, what did you have? Notre Dame versus Arizona? Because did you have Maryland losing?
I'm breaking up. I can't hear y'all. I'm breaking up.
All right, we'll move on to Seattle 4. I mean, I assume you have South Carolina making it past the Elite Eight anyway, right?
Yeah. Oh, USC and then Maryland are gonna. No. No, you are right. So I would put USC in Arizona, but then USC is just gonna win.
Yeah, that'd be the second year in a row. That'd be the second year in a row that South Carolina draws a low seed in the Elite Eight because they got a 10 last year. In this case, they'd be getting a 7.
I already
Arizona's a 7.
The next one. All right, and then if we look at the Seattle 4 region, we got the round of 16 between Stanford and Texas is what I had, and I have Stanford winning that one, and then I had Iowa versus Colorado, and I have Iowa winning that one.
Stanford, Iowa, that's clearly the two best teams there. You got 2 National Player of the Year contenders in Brink and Clark. That'd be an awesome game, and I think that we're going to get it.
Yeah, so end up chalky there. What about you, Pauline?
I did Stanford and Iowa.
Yeah. That feels pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean it is definitely tougher with the women's bracket because I think most years it gets pretty chalky in the later rounds, whereas the men's bracket sometimes has a little bit more parity in it, but not always, right? Like you said, we saw just last year South Carolina had to play a 7 seed in the round of 8. So so the Greenville 2 region
or 2,
I had straight chalk in the Sweet 16, and I have Indiana beating Villanova, but I do have an upset with LSU making it to the Elite 8 over Utah.
I kept the chalk there too. I think LSU is going to be a popular pick there. I don't know if it's the strength of schedule thing because they played a really soft non-conference. I don't know if it's the fact that they lost to the 2 best teams they've played this year. That's South Carolina, of course, and Tennessee in the SEC tournament. I still don't trust LSU fully. I think it's telling that they got a 3 seed with a 29-2 record or whatever it is. I think Utah beats them in Greenville, and you get an Indiana-Utah Elite 8 game.
I have SEC bias. You're about to see it even heavier in the next one. So, Pauline,
I think I know where you're going. But
You're
Greenville 2 round of 8.
Indy and LSU.
Yeah.
But wait. So, I don't want LSU. I know exactly what you're saying for your next pick. I know exactly what you're going to say, and I don't know if I want to see that again. I might want to see Indiana, but I don't want to skip ahead yet. So, but Indiana and LSU.
Okay. And then in your Seattle 3, which is the last side of the bracket for this one, I had Virginia Tech versus Tennessee, and I had Ohio State versus Connecticut, and I have Tennessee moving on beating Virginia Tech. Like I said, SEC bias. And then I have Connecticut beating Ohio State. So I got Tennessee, Connecticut in that Elite 8, which could be a fun game.
I don't even think it's SEC bias. I got that too. I think Tennessee's better than Virginia Tech, at least more talented. I think Tennessee played a much tougher schedule that knocked the resume. They've got more losses, but they've been definitely playing their best ball of the season lately, as you said. I think Virginia Tech's a weaker 1 seed. We were all kind of surprised that they were that 3rd 1 seed ahead of Stanford. And I think on a neutral court, Tennessee's more talented and playing better lately, and I think wins that game. And I agree. I think UConn gets the Elite 8.
And then, Pauline, your Seattle 3, Elite 8.
Okay. Being from Connecticut, I should be like pro UConn, but I'm not.
Did you pick Ohio State?
Yeah, I did.
That would snap the streak. UConn's been to 14 straight Final Fours.
But it's March Madness.
It is.
Madness.
I mean, they're going to miss one eventually. They're not going to go to 50 straight Final Fours. They're going to miss one eventually.
I did low-key purposely choose matchups that I had like a 50-50 gut feeling on because my gut feelings are over.
You're getting to that 50-50 point of proceedings anyway.
Hey, that would be entertaining for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they haven't missed a Final Four in 14 years. I don't even know the last time they missed an Elite Eight. UConn.
All right, and then just to speed things along, I'm going to give you my Final Four and my championship, and then we can pick the winner.
Yep.
So from the Greenville 1 region, I have South Carolina beating Maryland. From the Seattle 4 region, I have Stanford beating Iowa. So that would be a Stanford versus South Carolina matchup. From the Greenville 2 region, I have Indiana beating LSU. But I was kind of close to picking LSU there. And from the Seattle 3 region, I do have UConn beating Tennessee. So you got UConn versus Indiana on the other side. So that's my Final Four of South Carolina, Stanford, Indiana, Connecticut. What's your Final Four, Alan?
Exact same Final Four, and you can ask other people. I can't verify they're not here. That was my Final Four preseason. I got lucky; they ended up in 4 different regions. But my preseason Final Four was, and I think I put it on Twitter today, was South Carolina, Indiana, UConn, and Stanford. I think they've been the 4 best teams all year, and that's what you're going to end up with in Dallas.
Pauline, Final Four.
Hopefully, y'all can hear me, but my connection's not too good right now.
You're good.
We can hear you.
South Carolina.
Yeah. What's the Final Four?
Okay. So I said this is I said USC, Indiana.
Oh, she cut out.
We heard South Carolina, Indiana.
All right. Well, I assume Stanford, and then she didn't pick Connecticut on the other side.
So it'd be Ohio State or whatever.
Oh, you're back. Well, all right. We heard South Carolina, Indiana.
South Carolina, Indiana. Yeah. You good?
Pauline, can you hear us?
I don't think she can.
All right. Well, so I assume Stanford, and what did Ohio State was the other one that she had?
She had Virginia Tech versus Ohio State in the Elite Eight. So
okay.
I don't know what that pick was, but
okay. Well, you and I can keep going. So the finals, then I have South Carolina versus Connecticut, but I will put that with the caveat that I think South Carolina and Stanford is the de facto national champion.
I think we said that like November when we watched those 2 teams play each other. That game went to overtime. Those are the 2 best teams, I think. I think Stanford's the worst matchup for South Carolina. I've said for a couple of months that South Carolina's either winning the national title or losing to Stanford. I don't think anybody else can beat them. And I agree. I think UConn with a healthy AZ Fudd just changes everything. It's their best player. She was hurt most of the year. She got healthy, and they blitzed through the Big East tournament with her healthy. I think that's the second best team. Maybe not a matchup with South Carolina, but the second most talented team with a healthy AZ Fudd.
And Pauline, I think, gave up on the internet part, but she did just text
texting us
her final
bracket.
Yeah, so she said South Carolina, Indiana, Iowa, and Ohio State. So
I think a lot of people got a
very heavy Big Ten
there. Yeah. I mean they've been the best conference all year. I think a lot of people would love that South Carolina Iowa game just to settle the Aaliyah Boston Caitlin Clark thing once and for all on the court. I wouldn't mind seeing that, but I think if you're South Carolina, you'd rather see Iowa than Stanford.
Yeah, and then I'm assuming that she's got
South Carolina versus Indiana probably in the title game,
which would be fun. I would like to see.
That's been 1-2 most of the season. And did you pick South Carolina to win the national title? Because I did.
I did, yeah, over UConn.
I pick them till someone beats them. That's kind of my philosophy. It's what I did last year too.
When they've beat all those teams that are populated in the rest of my Final Four.
So yeah, you could. I didn't think about this, but if that path breaks that way, or a certain way. You could have the last 4 games all against teams they played in the regular season: UCLA, Maryland, Stanford, and UConn.
Yeah, which that is something I really, and maybe it's because you can predict who's going to be good in women's basketball a little bit better. But women's basketball does a good job of matching up the top
marquee regular season games.
Yeah, exactly. Across conference, and men's basketball doesn't always do that as well. But really quick, South Carolina obviously did not make it to the
dismiss
to any sort of postseason play for men's basketball. We do have a ongoing portal article on GamecockScoop.com that's kind of talking about some of the turnover and some of the guys that are currently in. As far as people that have left, Trayvon Minot, Javin Benson, and then today Daniel Hankins Sanford are the 3 scholarship guys.
Yeah, and Ford Cooper Jr. wasn't on scholarship, but is also in the transfer portal now too.
Right. And then South Carolina obviously hasn't brought anyone in yet, but there's a pretty extensive list of names that they've reached out to. Most right now are, and there are some people on our board that were a little bit disappointed in the names, but most right now are from the SoCon or from lower level. There's a kid from Brown, kid from Wofford, kid from Citadel again. But keep in mind, like, there's still teams playing right now.
Yeah, there's basketball going on as we speak. And I think I made this point last week. The more teams that start losing, the more names are going to hit the portal once their seasons are over.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, you got to hope that Lamont Paris has a little bit more of a runway this offseason, because if you think about it, he was still coaching at UT Chattanooga this weekend last year. So he's already making contact with people that he wasn't able to make contact with at this point last year. So hopefully that running start helps things out. We haven't heard official word on GG Jackson yet, but I would lean towards he's not going to come back.
And you think about that. I said this to someone else today. You take those 4 guys in the portal. Hayden Brown's out of eligibility. GG Jackson could be gone. You're talking about 6 guys you're turning over there. I mean, that's half a roster, really. Plus whatever else happens. This is going to be an almost completely different looking team next year.
Right. Which, if you do things right, it's gonna it could be good, because
I figure it out.
I think the pieces that you're keeping are all the best pieces that you could have realistically kept. Unless we get some surprises, obviously, right? But as of right now, we think Michi Johnson's going to be back.
He already said he is.
Yeah, we think Jacoby Wright's going to be back, and we think
I believe he also said he is already.
Yeah, and Josh Gray, right?
Josh Gray, Chico Carter Jr. is going to be back and hopefully healthy next year. Obviously, he missed a lot of time with a knee injury this year, but you take that 4, you take a Michi, maybe they wouldn't all start, it's kind of guard heavy, but a Michi, Chico, Jacoby, Josh Gray, blank starting 5. You can work with that depending on who fills the 5th spot, but you need more depth. Obviously, that's just killed them in so many games this year.
Yeah, no doubt. For those of you that were wondering, Pauline did just send in her Final Four matchup. So she thinks Iowa wins, South Carolina wins, and then South Carolina wins over Iowa, which that'd be a fun game. I would like to see that game too. So.
Do you have a men's Final Four? We have that on the sheet just quickly. We're not going to do the whole bracket for South Carolina's not in, but
Furman is my national champion.
Yes, go Paladins. 1/6 of the way there.
Yeah, so my Final Four ended up a little bit weird, I guess, because of my SEC bias again. I had Tennessee, Alabama, Kansas, and Texas, and then
Trusting
I had
Rick Barnes in March. Are we?
Yeah,
seems dangerous.
Yeah, and then I had Kansas and Alabama in the championship game, with Kansas taking it home. What about you?
Back to back. I couldn't do the back to back thing with Kansas. And I also think they're playing the toughest region. I put Alabama in the Final Four, Texas. I got that same 2 as you. Marquette coming out of that bottom left region. I can't think of what it's labeled now. And I actually have UConn. I always try to go 1-4. I think UConn's really good. They were underseeded. I think their Ken Palm's like top 5 in the country. I think it's the toughest region, the most fun region by far. You got Kansas, UCLA, UConn, Gonzaga in the same bracket. Kind of a bracket of death there. But I think UConn gets out of it, and Bama ends up winning the national title.
I think without fail, you mentioned Marquette getting there. Without fail, I never pick these like basketball heavy schools. And it has, bitten me in the butt before. Like when Villanova won it or whatever.
Sure, there's two of them, yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's.
I don't know what to think of that region. I don't trust Purdue. They don't have good enough guard play. I don't think Kansas State's a Final Four team. I kind of just pick Marquette by default. I don't trust Rick Barnes, like I said. I've seen a lot of Duke picks out of there. They're a 5 seed, but they're a trendy 5 seed because of the name and the fact that they won the ACC tournament. It's going to be interesting. I think Duke plays tonight in a couple hours, actually.
Which them getting hot, like I said, that does go back to that theory I said about the Tennessee women. It does matter when you're playing your best basketball for sure in a tournament.
Duke is right now, yeah.
And then really quickly before we get out of here, baseball, like I said, this week is insane. Baseball opens up SEC play this weekend at Georgia in Athens. Anything that you're kind of looking forward to there? Any concerns coming out of the non-con? Obviously, they handled the non-con about
no non-con concerns. You can't do much better than 17-1. Pitching roles is kind of my thing this weekend. Now that you're in SEC play, now that you're managing weekend series against much better competition, who pitches? Obviously, the starters are the same. That's been announced: Sanders, Hall, Mahoney. Who pitches where in relief? He's still doing a James Hicks kind of piggyback thing on Sundays. Where does Jerzenbeck fit? Because he didn't pitch in the midweek this week. He's rested, obviously. Kingston said he wants Eli Jones to throw this weekend. Where does he fit in the plans? I just kind of want to see who pitches where as much as anything. And I also think when you're on the road in the SEC, I think it's important to remember 2 out of 3 is fine. I know Georgia's not great. Georgia's not a ranked team right now, but on the road in the SEC, 2 out of 3 is fine. That'll get you where you need to go. And if you're South Carolina, that should be the expectation this weekend. They're a more talented team than Georgia. They should win this series, but I don't think they're going to sweep it.
No, yeah, I do think you not necessarily hit the panic button if you don't win the series, but people are going to chirp on our board a little bit.
It's one of those things where you clean up the non-con 17 out of 18 against no real competition other than the Clemson series. And then you lose your first SEC series to a team that's not bad. They're not the worst team in the SEC, but definitely not. They're not LSU. They're not Vanderbilt. They're not Tennessee. You lose that series, people are going to start asking questions, I think. And it would just throw more pressure on the next series. And obviously just early in SEC. They need to get off to a good start. That was kind of my other thing. Don't remember, they were 0-4 to start SEC play last year. They got swept that opening weekend. They lost the opener to the next series. They were behind the 8 ball from the jump last year in SEC play. And I don't think they can afford to do that again. And the schedule helps them not do that again because, like I said, you're not playing LSU or Vanderbilt this weekend. You've got Georgia.
Yeah, and one more quick pitching note. You mentioned Eli Jones. You just put out this stat in a article that you wrote on Tuesday, which you can find on GamecockScoop.com. But he's pitched in 4 midweeks so far and only has allowed 2 earned runs in 14 2/3 innings. And South Carolina has won all those games. Now, granted, the level of competition hasn't been that crazy, but it's good to have a guy like that pitching in the midweek.
That matters, though. I actually thought Kingston, just to quickly go back, he had a very telling quote Tuesday. I asked him about, because Jones, the last 2 midweeks, he's gone in relief and he started, but he's pitched a lot in both. What's kind of his role is what I asked him. And he said that they wanted him and Matthew Becker, who started the midweek Tuesday against Presbyterian, to both stay under 50 pitches. And they both finished at 47 because they want them to throw this weekend in Athens. And I just kind of started thinking about that. And you would know better. You were here. This time last year, they didn't even have enough arms to survive midweeks. Now, not only do they have enough arms to save guys for the weekends and still be okay in the midweeks, at least so far.
No, that's going to be huge. Obviously, they are hitting home runs at a ridiculous clip right now. They're not leading the country still, but they're still up there.
They're up there, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's going to help a lot. And they didn't have that last season, although they were, still hitting some early season home runs. But, by this point, you already were down Mahoney, who I think had gotten injured for the season.
Jones.
Yeah, exactly. So you're in a much better position pitching wise. Even you could even afford an injury or two now.
Why would you say that?
I'm not saying that they're going to have them. I'm just saying the depth is
for sure. And this is where it starts. I mean, it's a 30-game SEC schedule. We did predictions before the year. I think you said 17-13. Is that still where you are with this 30 games starting tomorrow? You higher?
I might be a little bit higher, but it's really hard to tell because they haven't really been tested. So
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see this weekend how they look against an SEC team, bottom of this, bottom quarter of the SEC.
I don't know.
But,
Probably if you're doing power rankings, probably like 9th or 10th, maybe of the
right.
14.
But I mean, that's probably around where Clemson would be too. So this is
and it's a road series, like I said. That's never easy in the SEC. So if you go to Athens and take 2 out of 3 this weekend, I think you're feeling more validated about things, I would say.
Definitely. And then it gets much more difficult.
You do get Mizzou next week also, I will say that. And that's probably the worst team in the SEC, at least talent-wise and on paper. And they were last place in the league last year. So it's a nice soft start these first 2 weekends. You really should be taking 4 out of 6, probably 5 out of 6 if you want to feel really good about things these next 2 weekends. But we'll get into the Mizzou series and breaking down what happened in Athens more next week.
And I do think if you do that, just momentum and RPI and the polls and all of that, if you go 14 and 16 or better down the stretch or whatever, then I think you're probably okay because you started so high that it's hard to fall.
Yeah, I think obviously 14 is your minimum. Anything less than that, you're probably not getting in the field. 15 makes you safe. You see if you can get to that 17 number you talked about, maybe you start talking about hosting. And obviously, if you're above 17, that's a terrific season, and you're probably hosting at least the first round of the regional.
I think if you get to 17, you're probably hosting more than anything because they know people show up at South Carolina.
That matters, yeah.
Any other baseball notes before we get out of here? There was one more football thing I wanted.
Yeah. I had one more baseball note, but get to the football.
The Greenville News, I'll give them a shout out.
Emily,
officially kind of released some of the details on the 3 suspended players. We've known this for a long time, but we were trying to we tried to point you in the right direction to find the information yourself because it was in the public record and the police records and stuff. But essentially, Anthony Rose had a concealed weapon on campus. Was it a dorm room?
Yes, it was 650 Lincoln Street was in the police report.
Yeah, that got found out by an RA or whatever, and then he tried to get Monica Rames and Cam Upshaw to help him conceal it, and that's what ultimately got those 3 suspended. They've spoken a few times about the possibility of them coming back, and so far, every time it's come up, Shane Beamer's like, they're going through the process before they even worry about it, which to me sounds like they're probably handling all the legal stuff, and then if there's a path back, they'll start to figure it out from there. But yeah, as of now, all 3 guys gone. Doesn't seem like they're going to be back this spring at the very least.
Certainly wouldn't think so. Now the spring ball's already started. It's only a month of spring ball. The spring game's in less than a month now. So
yeah, so just wanted to update everyone on that. We didn't want to be the first people to say it, but now that someone else has said it, I don't mind talking about it a little bit.
Yeah, my one other baseball note, GamecockScoop.com. Ethan Petrie profiled him, talked to his parents. This freshman came in, didn't know where he'd play. Just red hot start to the year. He's got 6 homers already. He's leading the team in batting average. If you want to know more about him, how some phone calls with his brother in the fall kind of fixed his swing when he was struggling in the scrimmages, the MLB superstar he worked out with in high school, some more info on Ethan Petrie on the website that I think some of you baseball people will enjoy. And that's about all I have for this week.
Yep. We'll have a preview of Norfolk State posted first thing tomorrow. You will have live coverage of Norfolk State.
I will be at CLA
afternoon. We will have coverage of the baseball series. One quick note on the baseball series. Tomorrow morning, we should know whether or not the weather is going to affect things. They are calling for some thunderstorms Friday afternoon, so it's possible there could be a doubleheader Saturday, but that'll be announced first thing tomorrow. And then weekly recruiting wrap-up should be posted tomorrow as well. Enjoy some basketball over the next few days.
Yeah.
Men's, women's. This is the most, I don't know where the statistic came from, but this is the weekend. This and the Masters weekend are the weekend that men get their boys snipped the most because it gives you an excuse to sit around for 4 days. So there you go. Yeah.
All right. And on that note, we are out of here.
All right. Enjoy sitting around. Hopefully you didn't have to go through that to sit around and watch basketball. But if you did, good time to do it, I guess. All right. Until next time, this has been the GamecockScoop.com podcast. We will see you later.